What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another Armor Core 6 build video. This time we're going to be taking a crack at our first Gundam, the Gundam Flauros from Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans. Compared to the Sazabi build, I improvised a little more with this one, but again remember that this series is not about getting the build exactly the same, it's about replicating the theme and style of the mobile suit as closely as possible. If you want to recreate this build yourself, I'm going to break it down step by step, including where all the parts come from, and I'll also include a PS5 share ID in the description. So just like last time, I want to provide some background info on this mobile suit for anyone who isn't familiar with it. In the post-disaster timeline that IBO takes place in, there was a massive conflict 300 years before the story of the anime that was known as the Calamity War. At the center of this conflict were extremely powerful mobile suits known as Gundam frames. These Gundams were equipped with 2 Ahab reactors as opposed to the standard 1 and made use of the Alea Vinyana system, which directly connected the human pilot to the mobile suit, allowing the pilot to control the machine as if it were their own body. Gundam frames were created by Gjallarhorn in order for humanity to fight back against out-of-control AI-equipped mobile armors that had expanded their target from just soldiers to all of humanity. There were originally 72 Gundam frames in total, and each one is named after one of the 72 demons in the Ars Goetia. However, as of post-disaster 323, in other words when IBO takes place, there are less than 30 Gundam frames confirmed to still be in existence, with only 5 of them appearing in the main story. One of those is the Gundam Flauros, which was excavated by Tekkadan alongside the mobile armor Hashmal at an abandoned mine on Mars. Given that Mika and Akihiro already had Gundams of their own, the Flauros was given to the next most skilled pilot, the happy-go-lucky Norbashino. After it was sent to Tewas for repairs, he had it painted in his signature pinkish-red color scheme complete with eyes painted on the head, and dubbed it the Ryuseigo 4. The Flauros excels at mid to long-range combat, with its main feature being the dual rail cannons mounted on its back. To support its artillery role when on the ground, it can transform into a quad-legged mode that allows it to better absorb the recoil of these cannons, but they can also simply be fired over the shoulder. Aside from these, it is also equipped with 2 machine guns and 2 small hatchets for close quarters combat. So let's begin recreating this Gundam as an AC. Our head is going to be the Alba by Elcano, and out of all the head parts in the game, this is the one that looks the most like a Gundam head, even though it has 4 eyes instead of 2. You can see it has those 2 fins on the top that are kinda similar to a V-fin, so again, we're working with what we have. This part becomes available for purchase in the shop after you clear the Breach the Carmen line mission in Chapter 5. One important thing to note here is that this mission is part of the Fires of Raven ending. In order to be able to select it, when you have to choose between the 2 decision missions Intercept the Corporate Forces and Eliminate Cinder Carla, you need to pick the former and side with Carla and the Overseers. Next up is the core, and we're going to go with the standard Melander by Balaam. The Flauros has a pretty boxy core, so I personally think this is the best option. This part is available as soon as you have access to the shop after clearing Mission 2, Destroy Artillery Installations. If you don't want to spend the cash, you can use the Melander C3, which looks almost identical and is given to you after completing the opening mission of the story. Again, for the arms, the Flauros has some pretty boxy ones, so I went with the Melander by Balaam, which becomes available at the same time as the core. You could once again use the Melander C3, which you get after the first mission, or if you want to go even bulkier, you can try the Basho by Boz, which becomes available after the ocean crossing mission at the end of Chapter 2. The legs are where we're going to take some creative liberties. Instead of recreating the Flauros' bipedal look, I thought it would be cool to combine the features of its normal and firing modes, since ACs in this game can't transform unless you count a certain final boss. So, of the 2 quad leg options, I chose the Viril by Balaam, which oddly enough has a pretty similar shape to the Flauros' limbs when it's in firing mode. These become available in the shop after completing the Destroy the Iceworm mission, which is the final mission of Chapter 3. Now for the weapons. The Flauros' main armaments are its dual 120mm machine guns, so we're going to go with a dual trigger setup. Out of the 4 machine gun options, the one that has the closest resemblance is the Ludlow by Balaam, which is given to you for completing the very first training mission. If you don't care about staying too close to the original, then you can go with whichever option suits your preference. Hell, you can even go super meta and rock double Gatlings. Just very quickly, the Changchen becomes available after the Iceworm mission, the Etsujin after the Ocean Crossing mission, and the Huben after the Attack the Watchpoint mission, which is the final mission of Chapter 1. So not only is the Ludlow the closest resembling machine gun, it's also the most accessible. Our 2 back units are going to be our heavy hitters, and this is how we're going to mimic the Flauros' dual galaxy cannons. There's really only one option here, the VE60SNA stun needle launcher by Arquebus. This is the closest thing to a rail cannon in the game and becomes available just before the Iceworm mission because you need it for the Iceworm boss fight. So lucky for us, this build just so happens to incorporate one of the strongest and most meta weapons in the entire game. Just like last time, you can feel free to experiment with your inner components. The nice thing about the legs we've chosen is that they can support a lot of weight, which is good for us because you'll likely need a heavier generator to support the EN load from the stun launchers. I went with the P06 SPD booster and P05 FCS by Furlong, and the VP20D generator by Arquebus. The booster can be bought after the Iceworm mission, and both the FCS and generator become available after the Operation Wall Climber mission in Chapter 1. This is what our final build looks like, and I'll bring up the detailed specs as well in case you want a screenshot for yourself. Moving on to our color scheme. Like I said earlier, the majority of the Flauros is covered in Shino's signature pinkish red colors. There's also some white on the limbs, face, and torso, some gold accents, and gray for the weapons and joints. If you're using the share code, the build will have these colors already applied, but if not, I'm going to show you how to make them right now. This is what I came up with for our main color, with RGB set to 190, 77, 102. If you want to play around with this, you can. This is just what I found was the closest to the Flauros' colors in the anime. As for the white, I went with one of the presets since it's just easier, going with the second one from the top that has the RGB set to 220 across the board. You could also use a preset for the gray. I don't remember why I didn't honestly. I went with 112 for all three colors, but you could easily go with the presets that have them all set to 104 or 81. Our yellow is going to be more of a gold color with the RGB set to 161, 123, 48, and finally our glows are going to be set to this greenish blue preset here to mimic the Flauros' eyes. Let's start applying these colors to our AC. The Flauros' head is mostly pink, so we're going to make those first two slots pink and then make the third and fourth slot white to try and recreate the white part of its face. Our last slot is the neck joint, so we'll make that one gray. Next up is our core, and we're actually going to go with the exact same placements as the head for this one. The Flauros has a bit of white on its cockpit, so I tried to add some white accents here to give this a similar vibe. You could also try putting white in the second slot, but that covers so much surface area that it may look like a little too much, but the choice is up to you. With our arms, we also need to be a little more lenient with the colors just because of how the color blocking works in this game. The Flauros has white on its upper arm between the shoulder and forearm, but the slots here won't let us color just that part of the arm, so I decided to go with pink in the first slot and white in the second. The third slot covers part of the hand, so I made that one gray, and the Flauros has some gold trim on its arms, so I made the fourth and fifth slots gold, even if they don't cover nearly as much space. Similar to the arms, the Flauros does have some white on the upper legs, but the way the colors are set up on these quad legs, I didn't like the way the white looked in any of the slots, so I opted to leave it out. I went with pink in the first two slots, gray in the third and fifth to color the joints and inner frame, and gold in the fourth for those slight accents. And our weapons are super simple. All the Flauros' weapons are completely gray, so I did the same for all four weapons here. This is what our complete color palette looks like. Feel free to pause and screenshot if you need to. If you want to go super detailed, you can also add this decal I made of the eyes that Shino has painted on all of his mobile suits. The share code is on screen here if you're on PS5, and here is the position information if you want to put them in the exact same spots as I did. Now we need to once again test out our build to see if it's actually practical in game. I took my Flauros into the arena against a different opponent this time, and just like with the Sazabi, this build proved to be very effective in a one-on-one fight. The stun needles are just so good for building up stagger meter, and as long as you're playing to the build strengths and staying close to your opponent so that your machine gun fire doesn't spread out too much, you should be getting very consistent staggers. This is a great time to follow up with your stun needles if they're reloaded, or a boost kick since it actually does more damage with a heavier AC. But the real question is, does it pass the Balteus test? Short answer, yes. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't sure how this would go because this was my first time fighting Balteus without a melee weapon or a shotgun. But I'm happy to say that just like the Sazabi build, I was able to take down Balteus in around 60 seconds with this setup. Of course, the stun needles are great for chunking his shield, but I was pleasantly surprised with how good the Ludlows were as well. I guess it helped that they recently got a buff. After playing with this build, I also realized that the weapons kind of cycle perfectly. You can fire your stun needles, then follow up by spraying machine gun fire, and by the time you need to reload your machine guns, your stun needles should be fully reloaded so that you can fire them while you're reloading your guns. It makes for a constant loop of pressure that feels very satisfying and very oppressive to play with. You can even space out your stun needle shots if you want to be a little more cautious in case you missed the first one. The only thing I would mention is to keep track of your machine gun ammo. If you stagger your opponent and want to use the stun needles to pile on the damage, I would start reloading your Ludlows before you fire so that you're not stuck in a situation where you only fire a few more bullets after your needles, and then get stuck with all 4 of your weapons reloading at once. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but proper ammo management and weapon rotation really make this build shine. That is how you build the Gundam Flauros in Armored Core 6. Let me know if you enjoyed this build and plan to try it out for yourself. I'm glad that you guys enjoyed this Sazabi video, so I do want to keep doing more of these. As a reminder, I already have builds for the Camphor, Grimoire Red Barret, and Vidar, but since then I've also made the Legolas from Age and the Faract from the Witch from Mercury. Let me know in the comments which of these you'd like to see in the next video, or if you have another suggestion altogether, I'm interested to hear it as well. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a positive rating, and if you'd like to support the channel, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications to help me fight the algorithm. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.